Good evening and welcome to the Murphy and Murphy Show here on Leading Edge Radio Network. I am Kara Murphy, and tonight my guest is Wayne Thompson, a police officer out of Houston, Texas, and he's been on my show several times, and I'm glad to have you back, Wayne.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to talk tonight police things. We're going to get updates on everything that's going on. I do have one thing a little business I have to do before we get into our talk, Wayne. Can you give me just a second so I can, I think y'all all know we have a vote coming up tomorrow. And if you have not called your representative, please do so and tell them that we are ready for a new Speaker of the House. This is very important. I called mine tonight. I called Kenny Marchant. I don't know which way he's going, but I know that when I did call, they told me that they are basically waiting to hear from his constituents before he makes a 100% decision. And so, which is the right thing to do. I don't know how true it is, but I do have a list of the representatives right now that are behind replacing the speaker, and of course that would be Representatives Ted Yoho of Florida, Louis Gohmert, who both have thrown their name in as a possible speaker. Representative Walter Jones, he's out of North Carolina, and he says he's huddling with 16 to 18 others who are looking for a viable alternative. He said that before Christmas. Representative Tom Massey of Kentucky, and Representative Steve King of Iowa, Paul Gosar of Arizona. And then we also have the Tea Party freshmen who pledged on the campaign trail that they would stand up to Boehner once they got into office, and that's Jim Brideson of Oklahoma and Barry Loudermilk, and I am not sure where he's from, and Jody Heiss of Georgia, John Ratcliffe of Texas. Dave Bratt of Virginia had originally said that he would back him, and he's the one that replaced Eric Cantor, but he has now reversed course and he will not back him. Sadly, those supporting him, and this hurts, Trey Gowdy, he seconded the nomination as a matter of fact, but he's kind of been Boehner's boy. He's assigned him to investigating these several different things that he's been investigating that we've all enjoyed watching clips from. There were several that said they would not support him, but they have since changed their mind. And I'm reading these names off because if they're your representative, please call their office. And that's Representative from South Carolina, Mick Mulvaney, from Kansas, Tim Hulskamp, from Idaho, Raul Labrador, and Arizona reps Dave y'all know it if you're out there, Schwerkert and Matt Solomon. Now keep in mind that part of the problem here is that Boehner has raised well over $100 million for these folks' campaigns, and they will not get that money. You can guarantee that. Boehner is not the nicest guy. He can be a little vindictive. They will not get anything if they vote against him. This is very important. Boehner has let us down time and time again. He makes promises he doesn't keep. It happened in over the 2010 Obamacare thing. It's happening again. It's going to happen with amnesty. Boehner needs to be replaced. And we can all complain about him, but then nobody does anything about it. So here's your chance. Make those phone calls. Hey, make phone calls to everybody else's congressmen too, if that's what it takes. Emails and phone calls, not just your email. Emails are too easy. Phone calls also. Okay, had to get that out of the way. Thank you for letting me do that. And how are you? How was your Christmas?
Very good, and it was a nice break with the family, and it was a busy week, but it was a good week.
Did you stay in town?
I actually was out of town, and I managed to pull off my first cable news network during interviewed during that week as well.
That's right. I saw that, and we were traveling, and I did not get to see that. Do you have a copy of that? Can we see it on your? Is it on? Is it linked on your Facebook page? I mean, your website.
It's on the Facebook, and I'll be putting it on the website here in the next couple of days as well.
Okay. Why don't you give us your website again?
It's voteWayneThompson.com.
Okay. And let's just review. If y'all have never heard Wayne on my show before, tell us a little bit about what's going on with you, what your aspirations are, and
well, thank you for that. Yeah, I've been a public servant since 1992. I've got a history in the military and also in law enforcement, firefighting, and EMS. I'm a two-term elected precinct chair in the Fort Bend GOP, and will also be running for constable of Fort Bend County Precinct 3 in 2016. I ran last time, but was districted out of my precinct due to the redrawing of the lines after the census. So I've been at it ever since, and been fortunate enough now to do 8 radio shows, 2 of which have been with you, and then another one with a partner of yours, and then 1 national cable news broadcast. So I'm very blessed and fortunate and thankful for that.
Oh, good. So now this is your 3rd time with us, right?
Third time with Leading Edge, and it's been a really good experience and ride. Thankfully, to you and many other radio hosts, both nationwide and in Texas, I've just been really fortunate to have that.
Well, good, great. Okay, well, let's just get into this. We're all very concerned, and as I told you in a text message, I continue to hold hold all law enforcement up in prayer at all times. I mean, this is crazy, and there was a couple of incidents that kind of fell under the radar. I just heard about them the day I texted you, and that was 2 or 3 days ago. And apparently, what was the timeline? Did those happen between Christmas and New Year's?
Right. Yeah. Basically, those 2 incidents were Greater Houston, Harris County area, and actually there were some others in California and Boston, Massachusetts, all during that time frame between Christmas and the last few days. So we have seen an increase in violence against law enforcement, and that is part of the job. But I think that some of these recent events have probably caused part of that increase.
Wow. Okay. Well, tell me about the incidents in Houston.
Certainly, we had a Harris County Constable Precinct 7 car that the officer, who was a supervisor, happened to notice that the one of the warning lights had come on for the brake system, and they took it to a county vehicle technician, and they discovered that the brake lines had been deliberately cut. This is a vehicle that was a patrol vehicle, but that the supervisor took home on a regular basis as part of a take-home car program, and they're still trying to investigate to find out whether that was done, at his house or at another location. But that could have ended up being a very deadly situation if it weren't for the warning signal in the car. And then we had another Harris County Sheriff's deputy that was working at a local hospital, and he was in the parking lot of the hospital, I suspect probably doing some rounds and checking the parking lot, and he had several shots fired at him, gunfire during that time, and they have yet to actually find the person that did it, but those were the 2 most recent incidents here, and then there were some others as well.
Wow. So, what kind of others?
LAPD, Los Angeles and California had, on December 29th, they had a patrol car that was shot at while driving down the street. They were able to locate that person and actually make an arrest and recover the rifle. And then Boston PD, two officers were responding to an apartment complex to serve an arrest warrant, and they had at least 5 people basically ambush and jump them. Fortunately, they were still able to make the arrest, and they were not seriously injured. so far, I'm not aware of any officer that has been seriously injured or killed, other than the two in New York that we had just laid to rest in the last few days.
Wow. So, what are you doing personally? What do you do? I mean, are you just having to constantly look over your shoulder?
Right. Basically, what we have had an increase in the awareness, both on and off duty. You know, cops and law enforcement in general are a little bit hyper-vigilant anyway. Mm-hmm. That's kind of part of our nature. Messages have been put out on our computer systems and our in-car computers about being aware of extra safety precautions, riding in two-man units or two officer units when possible. Some agencies, you know, that's just not feasible due to manpower issues and other things. And then also to be more alert and respond to calls with at least two officers or two cars. Those are things we try to do anyway, but many times due to budget constraints and manpower issues, we just don't get to do that like we'd like to. In a perfect world, we'd always do it that way. Mm-hmm. But those are some of the things that we do. And of course, cops are wired a little differently, but you know, you typically won't see us sitting with our backs toward the door at a restaurant or anything like that either. So,
well, you won't see me with my back to a door at a restaurant either.
I don't blame you. But those are some initial steps. You know, peace officers in the United States are very highly trained, and I feel like we have the appropriate tools and training in place to deal with these kind of situations. But it is a time where we have to be a little more vigilant.
Well, let me ask you this. This is something that I'm curious about. Is there going to be, do you think this whole situation is going to make it a little bit more difficult to recruit officers, to get people to want to go into law enforcement? Or do you think that there's always been this underlying threat of you know, for a police officer? I mean, you know, personally, to me, it's almost like if my son came and told me that he wanted to be a police officer, I almost feel like I want to talk him out of it right now.
Right. Yeah, I think your feelings are probably very. Any parent, mother or father, is going to weigh heavily as to whether their son or daughter should enter any type of public service. You know, whether that's the fire service, law enforcement, EMS, or military. It is all those are inherently dangerous. All those have their risks involved, and I think those of us that have joined those entities know that that's part of it. But there is certainly an increased level of maybe fear or caution right now that as a parent, I mean, I know I would hesitate. I wouldn't want my children to necessarily look at it as a first choice, not because I'm not proud of it. I think it's a very honorable profession, and I appreciate those who do it. But I think that right now, people are going to reconsider it. It has been harder and harder to recruit qualified applicants and to retain those applicants and employees over the last several years, and that's for several reasons, but this is certainly going to be one of them.
Well, I also am wondering, let's move over to de Blasio for a minute, because I don't know if I read it this morning or last night, but where he came out and said that when the officers turned their back on him during the funeral of the two slain officers in New York, that he felt like that it was disrespectful to the families and to the people. And then I believe it was the chief of police or whoever agreed with him. I've tried to look at this both ways, but de Blasio was trying to make it sound like that they were making this a political issue over, and then the police chief said something about this is more of a workers, I can't remember how it was worded, but more of a labor type dispute.
A grievance, union grievance versus a political.
Right. Okay. So I don't think it's either one of those, actually. I think it's these people are frustrated.
Right.
They feel like that de Blasio and Obama and many politicians who could soften this have instead stirred this. And so the very fact that these two men were killed, possibly that might not have happened if we had people stepping up in the public arena and trying to soften this instead of trying to continue to drum it up. Do you feel like even in your particular department or other departments that you know about that there's two sides to this, that there's some officers that are almost siding with the public? Do you understand where I'm going with this? Do you understand what
I do. Yeah. First of all, I think it's important to know that, as far as police agencies go, the New York Police Department is obviously one and deals with things that many other agencies don't deal with. They also, over time, have lost more officers in the line of duty than almost any other agency in the States, especially due to terrorist events of 9/11. And so, my heart goes out to them and the families of those that have lost the officers. And all of us in law enforcement are a family. And they're my brothers and sisters, even though they're, hundreds of miles away on the East Coast. So first and foremost, the loss is tragic and unfortunate. It was uncalled for. It was an act of cowardice, extreme cowardice in this case. And so I want to, make that clear that is a terrible situation. Secondly, I think the officers of New York PD are.
Wow, you're breaking up.
Others have not been supportive of their efforts, and I think they definitely, de Blasio has had some comments and statements that were inflammatory and that probably did cause an increase in violence and protest toward law enforcement. So I certainly can see why the officers of that agency feel unsupported by the leadership of the city. Commissioner Bratton, who is essentially their chief of police, I believe that he is a good law enforcement leader, but you can only do as much as the city councils and the city mayor and administrators will allow you to do. Whether or not the venue of the funeral was the right time to express this grievance, I'm not going to comment on that because I'm not there at that agency, and I think they probably know more than both you and I and everyone else unless we were there. But I think it does show that there's an extreme rift between the line officers and the city management.
See, now I didn't think of it as disrespectful or political. I felt like these guys were hurting.
I think so.
And they're putting their life on the line every day now, even if they don't know it. Even if they're just sitting in a car somewhere, they have to walk out the door every morning and look at their wife or their husband or their children and think, they have to suck it in right then. They have, because who knows if they're going to come home that night. They have the extra burden of who's going to take care of their families. I mean, there's got to be such a high level of frustration, and I just think they were hurting, and I do think that they feel like because of what they do, it's no different than us turning our backs on our military. These people are risking their lives daily, getting paid not near enough, and they need to be supported. They need to be supported more, and there's this huge. I mean, look at these riots. I mean, they're bringing in protesters. They're paying people to come protest. These are organized by groups outside of this country are organizing these protests with the support of people in high places in our political arena. And, if these guys were all to go away tomorrow, it would be, mass chaos. People don't think it out. I just don't, the fight continues. I read another article and I'm sorry, I don't have all these articles in front of me, but one guy was saying it's not the black community pulling up their pants, it's the police community not targeting the black community. I think that we've got, which came first, the chicken or the egg, and it just keeps rolling. And nobody wants to take the time to sit down and talk about it. They just want to scream about it. And, and look where we are now.
So. Right. Yeah. I think certainly every law enforcement officer respects people's right to peacefully protest and assemble. That is one of the reasons why we do this job, is to protect people's constitutional rights and civil liberties. However, as you stated, many of these folks are not actually vested in the event itself. Many of these folks are from outside areas or states, and the folks that put these together, like your Al Sharptons and Jesse Jacksons, they get paid exorbitant amounts of money that's how they make their paychecks. Mm-hmm. They're not really interested in the good fight or bringing something to light or fixing any problem. They're interested in keeping the problem going because that results in extra money in their pocket. So, the best course of action is for folks to meet with their local police and sheriff's offices and start a dialogue. That's where things are going to get done. They're not going to get done in the streets.
How do people do that? I mean, how would you suggest that be done? I mean, okay, so just for me, should I just go to Colleyville, go knock on the door at the Colleyville Police Department and walk in and introduce myself? And, how do you do that?
Yeah, I think, that's actually, although it sounds strange, I don't see any problem with that. I think the first step is, on the streets, just walking up to cops and talking to them and have a cup of coffee with them and saying howdy, when they drive by in the car. If you get a chance to talk to them, that would be the first step. And then certainly you could continue on to meet with them at the police department. Many communities have homeowners associations or other local groups where those law enforcement agencies will come out and talk to you, when the request is made. Of course, they may not be able to make every one, depending on the size of your area, but homeowners associations, community groups, exchange clubs, Rotary clubs. Now, all these are great ways to open the door for communication with your local law enforcement, and they want to do that. The both.
Wow, you're breaking up again.
Need to do that, and candidate. We need to open the doors of communication. I think we did a better job of that many, many years ago, and events like this tend to separate us more than they do unite us. And it's an unfortunate side effect, but it does happen.
Well, there's got to be some type of forum that can take place at community levels. And believe me, I've been thinking about this, and I've been making some phone calls to see if I can get some people to help me do this. I might have to pick your brain off the air sometime about that. But some kind of forum, regular forum, whether it's once a month or whatever, at a community level, where you bring in people on both sides of the issue and you just talk about it and figure out how to get around it. And really, I think probably the one thing that most of us have in common on both sides of this issue is our faith. So I think it needs to start in that type of a community, in the faith community.
Absolutely. Churches can be a vital role in the community, not just for religious purposes, although that's obviously the primary goal, but they can be a great forum for people to come together and have these discussions in a peaceful setting and peaceful manner. There are many other groups too that would do just fine, but churches are a great resource in the community. Usually they're well known, the locations are good, they're in a setting where people can come in and talk and feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Well, and because part of this issue is race, you know, but we all serve the same God. So, you know, we're all brothers and sisters. It's just that when you move away from that, that's the biggest contradiction to me right now. I just think about how the Lord is probably very grieved at seeing what's going on based on skin color, which is it shouldn't be an important issue. I mean, that should be a non-factor. So anyway, I just think that there should be some type of forum, and I am trying to work on that, and I have made some phone calls, and hopefully I can get something started, and even if it only happens in my own little backyard, at least I'll feel better about that. And I would suggest anybody out there do the same, because the division that's happening right now is a planned division and really has little to do with Michael Brown or Trayvon Martin or any of these people. It has much more to do with dividing people, and they're doing a very good job of it. And it's very, very sad. What else was I going to ask you about? I had something on my head, and you know, it floats away. That's what happens when you start getting old. But oh my gosh, I'm totally blank. I can't remember what I was going to ask you.
Well, I think that you know, you raise a good point, and you know, I've said it before that I really don't think race is the issue. There are some people that will try to make it the issue, but you know, I work alongside of officers of different skin colors and races and ethnic backgrounds, and you know, quite frankly, I think that it is very rare that officers make it to the streets and are doing anything illegal or immoral in regards to people based on their skin color or creed or religion. That our hiring process is very strict. It's very thorough, and I think most of the folks would be weeded out long before that could happen. So I think you're right when you say that, you know, people are trying to make race an issue, but you know, in the United States, we broke those barriers down a very long time ago. And I'll say it again, but you know, we have a black president, so I'm pretty sure that we've successfully removed any racial bias or anything of that nature.
Well, okay, I agree with you, and I am reminded of one of the questions I was going to ask you, and I don't know if this is done. I mean, if it's set across the board, or if it's local, or if it's statewide, or whatever. But in each department, do they try to achieve a certain racial mix that is representative of the area that they're in?
Right. Yeah. It's a general rule. In cities and counties are always going to try to have a makeup of officers that equally represent their populations. But we also have to remember that law enforcement hiring is a very strict process. There are personal history checks, financial record checks, background checks, family checks, and driving record checks. And at the end of the day, only the people that successfully pass those can be hired or be considered to be hired. And even after all that, that's not the end of the process, because after being hired, then you have to go through a field training process.
I'm losing you again. Are you there?
And then get freed as a full-fledged. Yes, yeah.
Okay.
You know, so law enforcement is a very discriminatory profession to be in for those legal reasons. So, you know, we have to understand that it's not a job that you can just put in an application and expect to get hired. There's way more to it than that. And all those factors have to be taken into play before an officer is hired. So, of course, they want to be racially diverse and reflect the populations that they serve. However, there are times when that can't be done if people don't pass those checks.
Right. Got it. Okay, and then another issue I wanted to talk a little bit about tonight was the I don't know if it's actually, well, it's delicate. I don't even know how to mention it, but it's this what people are seeing as a militarization of these police departments. Because I know in Ferguson that was part of the grievance there after the riot started, which of course, again, you've got to look at both sides here, because if people are screaming they want to kill cops, and cops have to be out there protecting other people from these people and they're cops, I mean, you're going to want to be protected. But I mean, I know that I can't even remember the name of the program where several different police departments are receiving militarized vehicles and weapons, and so and gear, and it's making people feel very uncomfortable. What is that all about?
Well, it's again a good question. It comes up a lot. I'm first and foremost, again, have military experience and law enforcement, but I'm a citizen, just like you are and everyone else. And I think for face value, it can seem concerning, but again, it goes back to the last subject. There are people that are making it an issue when it's really not. The militarization of law enforcement actually came into play shortly after World War II. So this is not a new concept at all. This is a very old concept. And after World War II, there was we were pretty sure as a nation that we were done with large-scale wars, that we wouldn't have much of a need for military-style equipment. And at that point, those resources started to be diverted and utilized and sent to federal, state, and local law enforcement. So this is not a new term. It's not a new or theory, and that has been successfully done ever since World War II. You'll hear people say, "Oh, well, the police department had a tank," or these. There's no law enforcement agency in the United States that owns a tank or that operates a tank. There are armored personnel carriers and other military-style equipment and weapons that are used by law enforcement. That includes helicopters, armored personnel vehicles, weaponry, and I think those things are needed and necessary. We have to understand that in the United States, we can't call upon the military for action for events like 9/11 or the shootings at the UT Towers or other terrorist incidents that have happened over the course of time. That is not the mission of the military. It is the mission of local and state and federal law enforcement. So we are charged to handle those events. Other countries like Russia and Germany, the military is called upon to deal with those type of events, and so that's when military equipment comes into play. But in the United States, we've seen over the last 20 years and even 10 years an increase in terrorism activity, large-scale attacks, active shooter events in schools and workplaces. And we have to be able to be in a position to respond with the equipment and weapons to protect our law enforcement and the citizens that we serve. So, again, I really think it's a non-issue, but people will latch on to it and think that we have a huge stockpile of grenade launchers and that we're ready to take over your neighborhoods. No intent there at all. Nobody wants to do that. But we have to be prepared for these attacks that have happened and are going to continue.
Well, yeah, I agree. I was just also reading that in Milwaukee, they had the police website had gone down. Was that recent? I guess it was recent. They had, I guess they felt like that somebody had hacked into their system.
Right.
Is that correct? Is that isolated there in Milwaukee, or is this happening?
It's not isolated. I don't think it's happened on a large scale, but I am aware of a couple other smaller towns that have also had that happen. that may be something that we see more of too. I know that several cities, and I can't name them right now, but that also had their websites attacked or taken down. Certainly is within the realm of possibility for that continue. However, I'm definitely more worried about physical attacks on law enforcement and public servants.
Well, of course I am too, but I'm wondering what kind of information they're hacking into. What kind of records are they? Are they doing what they did to Sony? And are you going to find out your bank account's completely gone tomorrow, or your personal information, your people know, your children's names or where they go to school, that kind of information. That's also very dangerous. One of my Wednesday night co-host, his name's Kevin Henson, the voice of reason. He is an expert in cyber terrorist defense, and we've talked at length about how dangerous hackers can be and what they can do, and because it is a form of terror, and
right.
We just don't know what kind of information they're grabbing out of those. Especially a police department, that's some place you don't really want. There's a lot of people, I'm sure, that they don't want that information public that shouldn't be public. So I felt like that was probably a concern. But I guess if you're not now, do you know if the departments do have some kind of special defense for that kind of thing? I mean, do they have that? I mean, because here's what happened. Kevin told me that Sony, because I asked him, I said, why aren't you out there? How come you guys weren't protecting Sony? And he said, we tried to. And Sony said they had their own IT department and they could take care of it. And that was last year. And apparently, because this isn't the kind of stuff that your really great nerdy IT guy can take care of. This is bigger than that. Right.
Yeah, there certainly are systems in place to help defend and defeat attacks. However, there's a huge difference between your local hacker down the street in your neighborhood versus a foreign entity that could be involved in that hacking. There's a lot more to cyber warfare than meets the eye, and it's not my area of expertise, but I can see that over time and in the future, I would expect that there's probably some foreign countries, China, North Korea, and others that will be trying to attempt that on a larger scale. And that probably will go even beyond that to include attacks on power grids and other resources. There are systems in place to protect that, but I think, the private sector does a better job of that than the public sector does. And if the private sector can be infiltrated, then I certainly think it is a risk for public safety agencies.
Oh yeah. Well, Anonymous has been around for a while, and there's nothing that they can't get into. I mean, if they want, they could be feeding the NSA information. They're all over the place, and sometimes you hear the stories about Anonymous, and you think, well, they're kind of good guys. They're kind of the kind of protectors, and then you hear the next story about them, and they're kind of bad guys. So I think they're all over the place. It's so in the long run, they may be a little bit more scary than what we think. What else? What else was I going to ask you about? Okay, yeah, and I was just looking at that story about the two Los Angeles police officers that were shot at. Is that what you were talking about just a minute ago?
Yes, okay. Correct.
Uh-huh. And also there was another. Oh well, here's something that's interesting that I wanted to talk about is that I've read in several different places. I think first read it from Reuters. We're getting busted.
They're coming to your house.
They are. I read that that police shootings or police deaths involving guns has risen 50% since over last year's. Did you know the figure was that big?
Are you referring to police officers being killed by guns or police using guns to kill?
Officers being killed by guns.
Yes.
It says that 50 officers were killed in shootings in 2014, which I actually thought that was not a big, that number I didn't think was that big, but apparently it was. It's actually a 56% increase from 2013.
Right.
So
yeah, that sounds accurate to me based on what I last looked at, and there was an increase in law enforcement deaths last year over some years past. An increase in assaults either by gunfire or other weapons. Of course, vehicle accidents is always high on our list too. But I definitely see that there is a resurgence in violence toward police, especially this last year, and I fear the beginning of this year in 2015. So we'll see, but things are not looking good for law enforcement right now.
Well, and also I read, and I think this happened today, or it was yesterday, possibly in San Francisco. Apparently, it from what I've read, it looked like it was suicide by cop. But do you know the incident that I'm talking about? The guy that was in a parking lot and.
Yeah, I heard a little bit about it. And suicide by cop has also seen an increase over the last few years too. And that's a difficult situation for law enforcement to be in. Of course, our priorities are to preserve life and property, and unfortunately, sometimes we're put in situations where we're forced to use deadly force, and a good portion of the time, those people are actually doing it with the intent of us ending their lives for them. That makes no one happy, and it never looks good. And like I've said many times before, there's no pretty way to paint violence. Violence is never pretty. It never sounds good. It never looks good. There's no good violence. So unfortunately, folks have turned to that as a way to end their lives, and maybe it makes them feel less responsible, or maybe there's religious reasons why they feel like that's the route to go. But we have seen an increase in that also.
Well, and that doesn't help statistics when you're looking at the raw statistics. I was interested to see that because when you go look this up, when you go start Googling this stuff, it's very difficult to get statistics because apparently there's a lot of departments that don't even report their statistics. But when you start adding these in, and especially in the initial stages, it did not say in the two articles that I read that this was suicide by cop, but the way they described it, it obviously was, which some could, honestly, if you look at the whole situation and you believe the grand jury, kind of sounds a little bit like there might have been a little bit of that in the Michael Brown situation. I don't think it was, but because he was acting like he was reaching for a gun.
Right.
So he had to know what was coming. So the point is, it's just another black mark when it's beyond your control, but it's another black mark and another thing for people to get angry about and to get riled up. Because, people are only going to listen to the part of the story that fits into the narrative that they want.
Right.
They want to believe.
Yeah, it's one of those things. The news crowd and media outlets have to fill their space and sell advertising, and so they're going to go with what sounds the juiciest. Many times, even if that means leaving out the facts. Mm-hmm. And there's certainly, it's difficult to get inside the mind of a dead person. We can look at the actions that they did just prior to what they had happened. But, each of these recent cases that we've seen where, in New York and in Ferguson and other areas, the key is the person did not comply with law enforcement. They did not follow lawful orders. They did not peacefully put their hands behind their back and submit to an arrest. And if that were the case, we wouldn't have had any news. There simply, it would have been another day. and now, we have these messes that we're dealing with, and other folks like the Jesse Jacksons and Al Sharptons hop on board, and the media hops on board, and the next thing we know, we have riots and other officers being assaulted and killed and injured, and it's an unfortunate roller coaster ride that could have been avoided with just a few simple steps. So,
do y'all ever go out and talk to the schools, the elementary schools or the junior highs? You do that?
We do, and I've also asked that both on our website and Facebook pages that parents take an active role in educating their children as to how to deal with law enforcement. We teach our kids, how to stop, drop, and roll for fires. We teach our kids about first aid techniques. We teach our kids how to drive, but when's the last time you took the opportunity to explain to your kid how to interact with a police officer during the course of a traffic stop or an encounter? When's the last time someone has said to their child, hey, if you're dealing with the police, make sure you keep your hands visible, be respectful, obey commands, don't resist. If we could get that in the heads of young people, then they would find that life would be pretty simple. Most contacts, 99% of contacts with law enforcement don't result in any use of force or violence or death or gunfire. It can be a very simple process. Unfortunately, when people do things that put law enforcement on the defensive side, the officer at the end of the day needs to go home to his family too, or her family, and we're going to do what it takes to make that happen. But I could only imagine if Michael Brown had followed commands, and if his parents would have invested a little more time and effort on raising a law-abiding citizen that respected police, again, we would have never had this issue.
Yeah, and so sad, so sad. Well, you know what? One thing I forgot to ask you when we first started talking, and that was on the Houston situation, with the car, with the brakes being tampered with. So, do you know the officer personally?
I do not.
Okay, so he takes his car home every day, right?
Correct.
Does he leave it in the driveway, or is there some kind of requirement that he not do that? I mean, how can we protect our officers from these kind of possibilities?
Well, that's a good question. As far as I'm aware, their agency does not require them to park it in a garage setting. Most of these guys, when they have take-home cars, the car sits, outside of their garage, either because of space issues or whatever. And there are some tactical considerations. I personally don't like bringing a car home for those reasons, but, there are some agencies where it is required. There are some people, like this officer he was a supervisor, so he probably had a necessity to be able to respond after hours and in emergency situations. So although I think it was a choice, it was probably one that he had to do as a supervisor. But, vigilance is one of the things that I ask everyone to do, including neighbors, citizens, other police officers. We all have to have a higher level of awareness these days, and that's not just for cops. I mean, that we're living in a day and age where terrorism has been the norm and will continue to. And there's an old phrase that says, "If you see something, say something." And we need people to do more of that. If you think something looks strange, or if somebody looks shady, don't just brush it off. Call your local law enforcement agency and tell them what you saw. Get descriptions, license plate numbers. Don't fall into the same routine, because whether it's your standard robber or rapist or terrorist, they're all going to use the same techniques.
Right. And we do need to be watching out for each other these days. And then the other question was, now the other police officer that got shot at there in Houston, he was off duty. Is that correct?
He was, well, just to be clear, in Texas and most other states that I'm aware of, peace officers are actually never off duty legally. We may be off of the primary clock from our agency, but we're always charged with taking law enforcement action if there's a crime occurring or a threat to the peace or person's safety. It's my understanding that this deputy was working an extra job at the hospital, which is pretty common. And in the course of his extra job was, employed to provide security services, but as a peace officer. And so, technically he was not there in the capacity of his full-time job. He was still on duty.
Right. Okay. So when they do these jobs, they go in their police uniforms.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
They're very often in full uniform, and there are some agencies like Harris County Sheriff's Office that if you are working your extra job inside the county, they do allow you to utilize a county vehicle. Just it's common sense. It's a force multiplier. It's more visibility. And I have no issue with that. It sounds like somebody took some pot shots at this deputy, and thank God that he was not injured, at least that has been made aware to the public anyway. I think he's fine. Unfortunately, it sounds like whoever did it is still running around. So, we may see this come up again.
Wow. Now that's scary. So, because he's there in the capacity, even though it's not his normal job, in that capacity, he can call for backup. And
absolutely.
Okay.
And he did. And it sounds like they got there in pretty quick fashion. Anytime an officer needs assistance, you will usually get folks coming out of the woodworks to help. And, it just seems like whoever did this, that area is pretty congested. There's a highway there. They probably just slipped off easily onto a major roadway.
Where did it take place?
It was at Cypress Fairbanks Hospital, which is in the area we call Cy-Fair, and it's near Highway 290 and Highway 6, and there was a lot of access and egress points there that could have been easily utilized for a getaway.
Isn't there a big, huge church right there too?
There's some large churches, and the area is growing very fast out there. So it would be pretty hard as a deputy who was on foot at the time to be able to probably catch somebody if they did it from a distance.
Right. That's a very nice area too.
It's
not like an inner
high
city
on the list for places where we would expect that.
Right. That wasn't too far from. Well, I lived in Katy, so
right. You're familiar with that area, and I think it just proves the point, though, that there is no routine in law enforcement. There is no safer time than others. We can be at home, we can be eating on duty, we could be at the patrol station or police department. The case. It was Ohio, wherever that was, several months ago, that led on a manhunt for several months. And he shot the trooper right outside of their barracks. So there is no safe place. There's no safe time. There is no routine. And again, I realize that applies to many professions. It's the same thing in the military. You could be on a training mission, but your helicopter could crash on a training mission. Mm-hmm. And we very often in society think of routine or normal, but in public safety, there is not a normal. You can go to make a medical call to help someone, and while you're there, a family member can assault you for trying to help that person. I've seen so many different things that just don't make sense. Domestic violence, family violence is another one that's very deadly and dangerous for law enforcement. And even if you go up there and save a female from her husband that's beating her to death, as soon as you arrest the husband, the wife will be attacking you as a police officer. And I understand that could be vice versa. It could be you're arresting the female. But anyway, there's no safer time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so we got about 4 minutes left. Let's get back to let's talk about you again. What you're wanting to do. Tell me, what does a constable do? What is a constable?
Well, very simply, in Texas, a constable is just like a sheriff, minus they have no responsibility for operating and maintaining the jail. So in Texas, there are two constitutionally required law enforcement officers. One is the sheriff and one is the constable. They can do away with every other police agency, cities, school districts, colleges. None of them have to, by legislation, have police departments. You must have a sheriff and a constable. So for folks in Texas, that's a very important position. Usually each county will have anywhere from 4 to 8 constables for their precincts and 1 sheriff. And legislatively, they have the same responsibilities as the sheriff minus the jail. They are an extension of the courts, so they do serve civil papers, writs, and those type of things, but they also patrol, have traffic enforcement, and all other law enforcement duty.
Okay, well, in Fort Bend, I would say that is a pretty busy job, because I know Katy,
right,
the unincorporated part of Katy that I lived in, we didn't have a police department.
Right. Yeah, Katy is Katy area, and Fulshear Precinct 3 is one of the fastest growing. Fort Bend's one of the top 10 fastest growing counties in the nation, and Precinct 3 is the fastest growing part of Fort Bend County. And we have several major cities, and even Fulshear back when it's a small town, and it will in 10 years. So
yeah, those areas are really growing fast. So basically, is Precinct 3, does that cover Katy, the unincorporated part of Katy?
Yes, ma'am. Katy's in 3 counties. The part that's in Fort Bend, Waller, and Harris County. The part that's in Fort Bend County is in Precinct 3. So it covers Katy, Fulshear, Simonton, and areas that border the Harris County and Waller County lines. And it is one of the fastest growing parts of the county right now.
Oh yeah. Well, I lived in Grand Lakes. Do you know where that's at?
Yes.
We were right behind we're close to the Home Depot on that side.
Right.
And man, the only time you ever saw law enforcement was constable or sheriff or
right.
Yeah, I mean you didn't, or highway patrol. They were always really good about showing up, unless you got into actual Katy. But
right.
Where we were at, there wasn't anything. And I'm telling you, when we moved into the Grand Lakes on the other side was the first one.
Right.
The one on our side was the second one. There was like 8. We had like 8 neighbors, and by the time we left there, the place was full. It's amazing, and they're still building, and I just couldn't believe it. It was just amazing.
That's right, and it's a very diverse community, and I'm just proud to be able to serve in my capacity now, and I look forward to being a law enforcement leader that strengthens ties with the community and the citizens that we serve.
Well, I think that would be just an awesome job for you, and we're pulling for you, and I'm look forward to watching as the time draws nearer. When is the actual election?
Well, my primary battle will be March of 2016. Of course, I'm on the same cycle as the presidential election, so after that, we'll move forward to November, but more than likely I would not have a strong Democratic contender at that time due to the makeup of Precinct 3. It probably will be a non-issue by the time I get to November. So.
Okay. Well, good. And your family's all behind this, I'm sure.
Yes, I've been fortunate to have family, friends, and supporters. I've been maxed out on Facebook for a very long time, and I get requests for signs from Canada and other areas, so I know the word's getting out.
Good. That is really awesome. Now, what can you tell us about your other gig that you're doing? Is that, have you got that all sewn up and tied so people know where else they can hear you?
As far as radio shows, or which
the other one. I don't want to mention it because I don't, you were still in the, I guess, early stages of that.
Yeah, we have several things in the works. Of course, I've got more radio shows planned and anticipate back on cable news network soon.
That's what I was talking about.
Some other good things in the near future.
Okay, well, I'm not gonna try to dig it out of you. I'll wait till everything's firmed up before you make any announcements on that.
There are some things that I want to surprise my contenders with.
So. Okay. All right. Good deal. Good deal. All right. Well, again, anytime you want to come on the show or anytime you have an announcement to make, please call me. I'm here, and I really enjoy talking to you. And we do support our law enforcement, and I hope everybody is out there praying for them and looking for ways to try to end this conflict, the best we can. But thank you for coming on the show tonight, and we will talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much.
All right. Good night.
Good night.